So, welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. Today, Stephen and I are going to explore the feeling people have of lack of spiritual progress, self-doubt, disbelief, lack of confidence in their practice, and what's at the root cause of that, and how can you step beyond that? How can you move beyond that? Because it's our experience as we work with people and talk with people, teach people subtle energy meditation, that there's often a point that is reached that is like a sticking point, like a point that people have a hard time getting past. Even if in a meditation experience, they have an experience where they are past it, very quickly after the meditation, they'll come back, and as they go to interpret what happened and kind of maybe evaluate the process or evaluate their own practice, there's some doubt or some disbelief about what happened and about their ability to just reside as that, right? There seems to be like a going somewhere and then a coming back to my everyday mind, and it seems like there's a big gulf between those two. And so there's kind of this disbelief or doubt or lack of confidence about having this shift of perception be continuous or be permanent, or the recognition that this is the nature of our being. We feel like somehow we're separate from that. So, and the angle on this that I thought we'd enter into is talking about the conditioned mind. And it's the conditioned mind, the mind that sees itself as a separate subject, separate from the world around it, separate from what it wants to get for itself, separate from these experiences that we want to have. It's this conditioning that is the hindrance, and it's so subconscious, right? It's so deeply woven into our body that we don't even recognize that that is how we're perceiving life, that we kind of slip back into that conditioning in a way that's very subtle, but has a really powerful effect on how we relate to ourselves, others, and our practice, and the possibility of living in a whole different relationship with self and with this awareness that we are. So I know, Stephen, you're going to talk about studies from Andrew Newberg's book, Neurotheology, and kind of point us toward a way to look at this from his experience.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you. Yes, and love and blessings to everybody, wherever you are. And we do hope that you're considering this question, and that is, what is real? What is doubt, if you have doubt, and its opposite? What's faith, or what's your belief, or what do you rest in to find that really deep confidence in life and the way that you deal with life? Because I do think often, just as you described, Kevin, when we're in periods of meditation and we can have really deep experiences of stillness or silence or spaciousness or love or some other form of direct understanding, and then you come out of that meditation, and if you've segmented or compartmentalized meditation as being separate to your everyday life, then you can sort of wonder, you go out into life and you get irritated and you bounce off one person's idea, and you're affected by the television, your social media's upset you, and so on and so forth. You can feel like, well, the experience somehow hasn't translated from on the cushion into off the cushion. And that, in fact, was one of the experiences. So Andrew Newberg, who has really released a lot of research in terms of the meetings of neuroscience and spirituality and religion. He describes one of the initial experiences he had related to doubt, and I always love the way they express this, because fundamentally all of us are, once we begin to understand our true nature, and we understand we're not separate from the cosmos, we experience or see, or at least understand to a certain extent, that we have an infinite potential, that we're simply open when we reach this open awareness, that everything is open to us, right? It's literally a case of our choice. If we choose to do one thing, then our life is going to go in a particular direction. And if we don't choose to do that, then our life is going to go into another particular direction. And this was something that Andrew Newberg approached, because he was in the realm of investigating faith and belief and religion and spirituality, and it seemed so vast. And he was heading to medical school, as he describes, in the University of Pennsylvania, and he'd often meditate, and he'd have these different experiences that he couldn't describe, and it led to him developing this field of neurotheology, in which he's a pioneer. And he describes how, and Kevin, it really struck me how his experience relates to your own experience in the desert. And perhaps we can connect the two, because Andrew Newberg describes how he coalesced into this realm of doubt. Now, because we're speaking on the subject of doubt and the lack of confidence, or when a lack of belief gets in the way, he said he started to doubt everything that he was doing, everything that he had experienced. And I'm sure all of you listening have had one of these experiences sometime in your life where you really begin to doubt what it is that you'd originally kind of thought or based your life on, or your life path, and you have a change. And he said that's what happened. He had this realm of doubt, and it upgraded to what he called an infinite doubt. And he said he realized, like, there was nothing he could know, that this realm of doubt extended out infinitely, and there was nothing he could know, and everything was contained within this cloud of unknowing, or this, unknowing state. And he said, actually, in that infinite doubt, everything became one. So everything was undifferentiated, much like you were talking about in the beginning of the talk, Kevin. He went beyond the conditioned mind. He said, he describes it as everything was undifferentiated without ego or self. And he said that he concluded that ultimately he'd never know. And that gave him an enormous insight that it was okay not to know. And that means I can just keep looking. And he said it made him think really deeply about everything from, as he puts it today, everything from coronavirus to Trump. It made him be open to the whole opportunity. His question surrounding Trump was, why do some people think he's the greatest and other people think he's exactly the opposite? So these were really a lot of questions that he said were actually okay to ask. He realized that in that great infinite doubt or cloud of unknowing, that it was okay to let everything else arise. And curiously, as we were discussing, Kevin, that kind of relates directly to the cloud of unknowing. So, because for those of you who don't know, there was this beautiful anonymous work that was created in the 14th century called The Cloud of Unknowing. Nobody knows who wrote it, but the entire centering prayer tradition of the Carmelites, which I was trained in as a 0-year-old. So when I was a baby, that was what my godmother and my mum trained me in. That entire practice is based on this text called the Cloud of Unknowing. And in that, they suggest that the way to faith or knowing or belief is to actually abandon all the objects, all the activities and attributes of, in this case, God's activities, and be courageous enough to surrender your mind and your ego to this realm of unknowing, at which point you'll begin to glimpse the nature of everything, the nature of God. And that's, in a similar way, is what happened to Andrew. And the cloud of unknowing is it's a via negativa path. In other words, instead of saying God is this, or life is this, or source is this, or this is the way things go, you do exactly the opposite. As a way of discovering the purity of it, you recognize that that's beyond the capacity of any mental conception. And so it's without definitive image of form. So it's no form, right? Reminds me of the Heart Sutra, no form, no shape, no, all of that. So, and it's interesting when you think about that, beyond the capacity of mental conception or beyond the conditioned mind, that when you connect beyond the conditioned mind or beyond mental conception with research. So again, Andrew Newberg in his studies of cognitive mind and the intuitive mind, he discovered that a lot of people who had faith or belief activated different areas of the brain, so particularly the prefrontal cortex and certain areas of the parietal and temporal areas of the brain that activated areas of belief and faith, and that when you were in the cognitive part of your brain, you didn't necessarily activate that part. The cognitive brain was the conceptual part of the brain was trying to make sense of things and put connections together, but in a very object-based, like here's reality, here's how it fits together. Whereas the intuitive part of the brain didn't need to do that. And so then Andrew went into a number of studies and researched, faith and belief. And and to quote him, he says, in our research, we found that one of the best things that you can ever have or do for you, as far as your brain's concerned, is to have faith. Because he said, when people feel optimistic on this really basic level of what we call having faith, then the world itself seems okay, right? And in that sense, if you think of infinite doubt, you can have also infinite okayness, where actually you believe that one way or another, you don't have to be the solver of the problem. And in the same way as it was okay then for Andrew to explore doubt because this realm of doubt was infinite, so it was therefore okay to explore it. In the same way, if you have really deep faith, you have this real deep certainty that no matter what arises, that you'll be able to resolve the problem, whatever. And those beliefs then help to support your brain's functions. And so in that sense, you then become less anxious, you become less depressed, and you begin to activate your own behaviors and emotions in a way that's very, very positive. And it actually changes the way ultimately that you deal with society in your world. So that was, one of the ways that he considered that it was so positive to have faith. And then he did, as we've mentioned before, he did a number of studies on meditation and prayer and the way that these had such positive effects on the brain and on the body. So, for example, meditation and prayer activate frontal lobes and language areas of the brain, and they did these studies on kirtan, kriya meditation, where they showed simply by doing that, in fact, whether you were religious or not, simply by doing this meditation practice, it improved, or reduced stress, anxiety, and depression. And they actually were associated with baseline changes in the brain's frontal lobe functions, which regulate those kinds of cognitive processes and modulate emotional responses. So I thought that all those connections and the way that, he did a lot of research on spiritual retreat programs, and he showed that really significant changes occurred in the areas of the brain that release dopamine and serotonin. And again, those are involved with cognition and emotional health. So it's really this connection between, going beyond the conditioned mind and how the powers of faith and belief can activate these very positive areas in the brain and actually contribute to emotional well-being and health. And then how meditation and prayer and practices associated with many of these faith and belief aspects of religious or spiritual practice can then go on to support our brain functions and healthy body functions. So I thought all of those were beautiful studies and speak to the power of going beyond the unconditioned mind, going beyond the conditioned mind to the unconditioned mind and into that cloud of unknowing, which comes all the way back to Andrew Newberg's own experience of infinite doubt and how everything's contained within that, and our own, your and my own experiences of how everything is contained within pure awareness. And you might want to connect everyone here to that wonderful experience you had in the desert, because I think that truly speaks to the power of going beyond the conditioned mind.
Yeah, so I really think the heart of this is this direct experience that's beyond the conditioned mind, because the conditioned mind is always set up in opposition, right? Subject object, or this versus that, or its reality is divided according to conceptual frameworks. And that, even belief and disbelief are a dichotomy that exists within that. But direct experience transcends that. Direct experience, and I'll go back to this experience I had in 1984 in the desert, where I spent a month backpacking and hiking and just being in nature without civilization, right? Without reading anything, or without TV, without, just in the natural world, sitting there, hiking through it, sleeping on the ground. And there was a very direct and palpable experience that started to happen, where as I looked at the landscape, there was a deep stillness to the desert and a pristine silence and a vast spaciousness. And those qualities of the landscape just absorbed in my body, heart, and mind, so that my body, heart, and mind just exhibited or it was completely relaxed, just as a result of attending to the natural environment. And I was a philosophy major, so I'd done a lot of thinking about these things and been exposed to a lot of concepts about spirituality and a lot of ideas about what it meant, or belief systems in churches that I grew up in. But this was a completely different quality of experience. This was a direct experience of the nature of mind, the nature of awareness, just naked awareness, a direct experience of naked awareness, where there were no thoughts, there were no emotions, there was no movement of the body. It was simply that stillness, silence, and spaciousness. And so that direct experience was so profound and compelling to me that I've never forgotten it. That was 1984, and I can remember that as if I'm there right now. And certainly all the practices I've done as a result of that experience just have deepened that and widened that. But it's that direct contact, that direct experience, where there's just no doubt, because you're not thinking, you're not in narrative mind, you're in direct contact with what is vast and open and clear and one. And the source of all. And I think that's what, it's the conviction that comes from that is the real difference, that the difference maker, right? Is for that to be so compelling that nothing in the conditioned mind is that grabbing anymore, right? Because that's so compelling. And you see that in all the great mystics, they talk about just this rapture, or this clarity, or this vast sense of connection. And it's that being so felt in such a deep way that's beyond doubt. It's beyond belief even, right? It's beyond any conceptualization. That's the sort of leap that once you have that experience, then there's no going back in a certain sense. It's because you don't believe the conceptual world is just seen as pragmatic, right? And this world of interactions is just conventional. It's just the result of social convention, but it's not compelling in the way that is. And this is just, the conventional world is seen just as arising out of that, and as a play of different forces coming together and dissolving. And there's a lightness about all of that, because what is beyond, or what is the source or the container or the ground of that, has been realized directly in a direct experience. So that seems to me, so what is it that leads to that experience being so compelling versus people who we're guiding meditations, and people describe these states that are just like that, we're listening to them describe the state, and they're like, yes, that's it. That's what we're talking about. We're pointing at that, and you're feeding it back to us. And then there's a moment of slipping back into the conditioned mind that seems to separate us from that. So what do you think is the key to this kind of this direct experience of the vast boundless awareness just being ever present and a constant background, versus slipping, like going into it and slipping back into conditioning, believing conditioning again, believing the judgments and fears and doubts of the conditioned mind? What is it that is the key there? Is there a key?
Yeah, it's a good question, Kevin. And thank you for that beautiful description, because I do love listening to you talk about the desert experience, because you can feel it as a listener. And I think that's the key. So I'd put down a couple of things as being really crucial to the key to remaining in that experience 24/7. So one is that, and often I find this with people that I've trained over the years in meditation, and I know we have in our groups, the moment that somebody experiences that, and you can tell, you can see it in their eyes, you can feel it in their heart. And the key is to help them to recognize, one is, it's not because of our guiding or a piece of music or whatever it is, your brainwave entrainment. It's nothing to do with that. It's actually you. It's actually your direct experience. So one is to own it, to actually not give your power away and say, oh, it's because of this teacher, or wow, that person's amazing. It's I think Rupert Spira talks about the fact that we go through periods with whether it's our teachers or our meditation practice or our group practice, where there's a certain amount of time where you've got to devote yourself to the practice that you're doing, and then you surrender to it. So it really saturates you, that experience. But then there's a point in which you have to also equally surrender to the teacher or the practice and become that, that you're experiencing. Like, as you said, the direct experience is so compelling because you know directly that you're that. And that is really, really crucial to get to that point where you're able to own the experience you're having. And you can, so it seems odd when you talk about going beyond ego to say, then you've got to reclaim it back. But there is kind of a funny kind of conundrum that occurs that all the great teachers speak about, that they are deeply devoted to their masters or their practice and their lineages. But then there's a point in which, like Yogananda, where he had to go out and make it his own and teach in his own style, and know that direct experience is his direct experience. That's part of the way that we express creatively through the cosmos. So one is owning it. The second one is remaining in the felt experience, so the heart of the experience, rather than going up into the mind. And you can actually see this easily in people when they have the direct experience, and then you're speaking to them and they're totally in that moment, they're describing it. And then there's a point at which something else happens, maybe someone else speaks, or they look at their phone, and they come out of that heartfelt experience. You know, when you're talking about it or when I talk about it, you can actually feel it, because there's almost a sense of dropping into that felt experience. So I know you're describing it directly from that felt sense. So learning the difference. And as you said, there's a practicality where you come up into the cognitive areas of life, or this object-based awareness, in order to function in this world. But you know always where the foundation is. So that's really the second one, is knowing the difference and being able to rest in that felt experience, and then being able to share from that limitlessness, from that really deep space of open, limitless, infinite, indivisible, compassionate, loving awareness. So to be able to recognize that difference. And often it's to do with that. You can see or start to recognize when you as a person come up and need to engage in that way, and you've dropped out of that felt experience. So that recognition is really, really important. So first is the ownership, second is the recognition. And I guess the third part of it is something we often talk about on our courses, is visit this often. Make the felt experience of conscious, limitless awareness part of your everyday. If you have a direct experience of it, just simply go back and stop and experience it, feel it. When you sit in your car, when you wake up first thing in the morning, when you go to bed last thing at night, just before you meditate, while you meditate, just as you're about to eat breakfast. I think that real conscious felt sense of what that direct experience was, just like you've cultivated over so many years, allows us to directly experience silence, stillness, and spaciousness in all those moments. So little glimpses often. It's a quality that Mingyur Rinpoche often encourages in all his retreats, as he says, you know, when you revisit this felt sense, and he talks about the felt sense as well, at those final stages of Dzogchen or Mahamudra, it's actually a felt sense of that open, limitless vastness. So right. visit it often, you know, revisit, glimpse it often, take time out of your day. If, as you said, nothing becomes more important. You realize that is the most important thing. So why wouldn't you want to revisit and be with that? Especially since we have so many moments when we could put our phones down, or could stop watching television, or could stop, full stop, and just
right, which is re-engaging. I mean, anytime we're engaging in any kind of interaction with the phone or the computer or television, or it's the conditioned mind. That's all the conditioned mind there, and reinforcement of the conditioned mind. So how much time do we spend there, and versus how much time do we spend cultivating this direct felt experience of stillness, silence, spaciousness, vast awareness, and that is natural and always there, and because it's the essence of who we are. But how much time do we take our attention to that? Right. And that's where practice is like essential, because the world is practicing us in conditioned mind, right? It's reinforcing that at every turn. And so that's the vital importance of taking time to connect, to contact in a very direct, felt, inner sensory way, this still, silent space of awareness. And then, as you said, revisit that often throughout the day, so that there's no moving. It's not like, okay, I'm there and now I'm out here in the world, but being present as this awareness is how I'm relating in the world, right? There's no separation between meditation time and time in the world. And that comes from that practice of revisiting in a very direct, felt, sensory way. So it so permeates your body and your heart and your mind that there's no doubt about it. And it feels good, right? So it's not like we're suggesting something that is like a drudgery.
No, Kevin, I'm just exactly, totally. It feels so good. Kevin, I'm just curious what advice you'd give to people who, like you, who have, so they're meditating and they have a sudden awakening, or they are out in nature and they experience this vast stillness, silence, and spaciousness. Because I know you embarked on a very curious mission after that, and to find. So when somebody has that sudden aha, what would you recommend to them? Because as well as revisiting it often, we sometimes get spurred a little bit like Andrew Newberg to kind of explore. It makes us go deeper, it makes us explore. What would you say to somebody who just has this and maybe is wanting to explore more deeply, or they're wanting to find out? What was helpful to you after that initial?
Well, probably what was most helpful to me is that it was a whole month of that. So I was, the words emoji come to mind. I was marinating in it, right? I didn't just have it for a moment, but I was marinating in it.
That's so true.
That applies to a meditation practice too, is, we could touch that experience in a morning meditation and then rush off into the day, right? But it's so different if not only touch it, but really soak it in. And really, it's like Joe Dispenza talks about in rewiring the brain. It rewires through emotion, right? Through really sitting with and feeling that emotion saturate every cell of the body and heart and mind, and permeate the whole space. And then like stay with that, and then notice no conditioned mind will come in there, right? And there may be discomforts, or, oh, I want to get out of here, or some part of you objects to that, but just sitting with all of that and just marinating in all of that, and allowing different thoughts and different feelings to just come through, but still staying with it, and allowing whatever comes up to come up and then dissolve, so that this felt sense of that which is beyond all thought, all feeling, beyond any sensation in the body, is so permeating that there's nothing else.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I did think you're quite right about marinating. That marinating opportunity you had for a month, is like a whole series of what we were talking about, being bringing on the cushion to off the cushion. Well, you didn't have either really to consider. You were in both, and both were there, and it's right. For a
and
long
I don't
period.
think that that's necessary. I think you can apply that idea to a 20-minute meditation practice, right? You can apply that idea to how you approach your meditation practice and how you move from your meditation practice and how you revisit it throughout the day, so that that felt experience just becomes so familiar and so compelling that no matter what is happening in the world, it doesn't touch that, right? This direct experience of this boundless awareness is unchanging. There's nothing that touches that. There's nothing that disturbs that peace. That doesn't mean that your peace won't get disturbed, right, during the day, or you won't have a variety of emotions or variety of thoughts, but underneath all of that is this undisturbed presence, this deep peace, this deep compassionate awareness that is holding it all.
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's so true. Kevin, thank you. This has been such a beautiful discussion.
Thank you, Stephen.
Been both very deep, profound, and vast and direct.
Well, thank you all for listening and watching, and thank you for your practice. Enjoy your practice. And that's a real important essential point, is the joy in the practice, the deep joy. It feels good. Find that for you and marinate in it.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everybody. Love and blessings always.